looked at a burn plan. Did y'all look at, you posted it, right?
It's been put up. I don't know if they've actually looked at it.
Have any of y'all ever looked at a burn plan? Ish? Okay. Y'all want to pass this around? I only got, I think we got one on the paper. Oh yeah, y'all got one, never mind. Y'all do have one. See, y'all have seen it. Y'all supposed to help me out. Alright, so this is a burn plan can be several different things. The main things you want to focus on with a burn plan is you want to look at number one, what you're burning, what is the overstory, the understory, kind of a quick description of that. But then also you want to take into consideration, which is the main thing, which is mostly what happens, is where your smoke's going to go. So have you guys been able to look at the smoke management guidelines at all? I think that got posted as well.
It's all up there.
So again, it's a booklet that we print out. And of course I forgot my booklet, so I do have the virtual standpoint. And basically it is a 20-page document. I love whenever it gives you the numbers over here. But it gives you information for your smoke management. So with prescribed burning, as you can imagine, with people coming in not only from risk of wildfire, but it's also as you guys get out into the professional world and start trying to do management of an area or whichever field you're going to go in forestry, one key that comes back is promoting prescribed burning, right? I'm sure you guys, because you guys are second year now, right? So y'all have already had over a year, almost 2 years of saying prescribed burning is good, prescribed burning is good. So if we get a bunch of, you know, knuckleheads out there burning and smoking in areas like downtown Charleston, which has been done before, you know, it can happen. I've been on a fire when it almost happened. So again, those kind of things are what the smoke management guidelines are in place for, to keep you to making the best decision possible whenever coming to burn. So the point of a burn plan again is to give you a window, right? It doesn't say this is exactly when I'm going to burn. I mean, you can write it that way, but you'll never wind up burning it. But if you write a burn plan that says it has to be 75 degrees with a south wind that's blowing at 12 miles an hour, good luck. You know, good luck being able to do it, because this is also a documentation whenever you get your CPFM, which is Certified Prescribed Manager's license, that keeps you out of the courthouse. You having this in place says I set parameters based on these conditions and burned it within this window so that it was safe as it could be. Things happen, it's weather. You know, we all went through these past 2 weeks with snow and ice. How correct was the weather that they predicted on that, right? It was in a range and we didn't know what was going to happen. I don't know who got snow, but we got a little dusting is all we got. So again, it's only as good as the tools you put together. So whenever you're writing a burn plan, you want to give yourself a realistic window to meet the goals, but then also you want to cover your butt too, because I'll be honest, with the Forest Commission, there are certain areas that I will not burn, even though it's within the parameters. Even though I am far enough away from a smoke sensitive area, I won't light it, because if something goes wrong, a lot goes wrong. And it's more than just getting out. You know, with burning, one of the easier things to do is keep your fire within the lines, because all you got to do is use your lines to manipulate how the fire burns the area. This kind of making sense, or y'all kind of getting lost on me? Y'all good? Keep nodding every now and then. Y'all with me? Still good? Okay, perfect. So, on the smoke management guidelines, have y'all learned about prescribed burning at all? Any? A little bit? So if I say category 2 day, you kind of know what I'm talking about? Not at all. Not at all. Okay. Well, that'll be homework tonight, is go home and read the smoke management guidelines, because to write this plan, you're going to have to know what category you're looking at. And the category comes from the ventilation rate. Anybody want to take a guess on what that is?
Where the smoke's going?
Where your smoke's going, but even more than that, you know, your transport winds are going to carry your smoke in a direction. Your ventilation rate is going to carry your smoke up. So you can imagine if you burn on a Category 1 day, you're going to be able to look up and see this haze all over your head. And what's going to happen whenever that kind of comes together and decides to come down, back down to ground, because smoke always comes back down, is it's going to land right over there. If you get a Category 5 day, it's getting way up. Whenever you're riding around and you look and you see columns off in the distance and nothing but like a big plume of smoke, looks like it's going straight up in the air like thousands of feet, that's what you want. It goes up there, it kind of dissipates, and it's much less likely for it to settle in on a neighborhood or a hospital, something like that we don't want. So that's the main thing we're looking at whenever we're talking about building the burn plan. So smoke's number one. We want to make sure where it's going, how high it can get up, how high it can get out of there. So we're also going to look at different winds. So your ground wind, which is like your ground or 20-foot wind, that is your immediate fire behavior. If we have a wind blowing straight this way, which would be southish, a south wind, blowing straight along here, that's where your smoke's going to go, immediately on the ground, and that's how your fire is going to spread, which is very important too. But I have written plans before and been burning where you have a south wind on the ground and your transport winds will be like southwest. So anybody want to kind of take a guess why that could be an issue? Because we're talking about the ventilation,
fire going
right?
one way and smoke going the other.
Exactly. So you're standing on the ground, and whenever you call in the burn and you say, oh, I got a smoke sensitive area to the north, what you're actually going to be calling is a smoke sensitive area to the northeast, because once it lifts up, the smoke's going to lay over that way. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So again, if you're ever trying to squeeze in a burn that's kind of got some tight smoke sensitive areas, you really want to pick a good high category day with a good solid wind that is going and sticking together, because it can get kind of squirrely. And just a little tidbit, whenever you guys get out there in the real world, burning on an east wind sucks. East winds, they're always kind of variable. They're real shifty, especially on the ground. So just, you know, note to self. You can burn on them, but they're just more aggravating, and you're going to eat smoke a lot more than you will in some other ones.
So one of the things that Miss Ruth told me to make sure that was emphasized is explaining what an east wind means. Does that mean the wind's coming from the east, or does that mean so?
Well, I'll ask you guys, because you guys are second year, right? I mean, a couple more months, you'll be graduated, professionals, starting your careers. Whenever I say an east wind, what is that?
It's coming from the east. It's coming from the east.
Oh, we got two different competing things here now. Which one's right?
It's coming from the east.
Coming from the east. And that's why it's coming from blowing too. And that's why I'm saying, with the smoke sensitive talk, a west wind, you're going to look to the east for your smoke sensitive area, right? You got to make sure all is right, because whenever you call this in, the dispatch is going to ask for your smoke sensitive area. If you give them the wrong one and it goes into the plan, something goes wrong, you smoked in something you shouldn't have, and here you are up the creek, right? So again, all these things have to be in place so that your butt's covered. So, cover it, we good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good catch, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, you get in these scenarios and you always assume everybody knows what you do, but you know, sorry. Whenever we're talking about categories, and again, you guys don't have to memorize these numbers because I don't have them. So whenever we're talking about ventilation rates, again, what are you guys going to do tonight, or at least before you do the presentation?
Look it up.
Look it up. How are you going to look it up?
On the thing she posted.
Right, the smoke management guidelines. Please don't just Google it, because you probably get it wrong. But actually, if you do, if you do want to Google it, that's fine too. Just make sure you Google SC Smoke Management Guidelines and it'll pop up, and it's our website. So you can get to it there, but don't just, not just smoke management.
Wikipedia.
Yeah, don't Wikipedia it. They'll be telling you all kind of crazy stuff. But looking at the ventilation rates, and this is kind of the, if you can capture the distance that we're talking about when we're talking about ventilation rates, the categories are 1 through 5. So 1 is 0 to 17,000 feet. So you can imagine 17,000 is pretty high, right? But if it doesn't get any higher than that, you're still running into problems because that smoke's going to come right back down on top of something. So really, whenever you start reading and looking over at what you can burn on what kind of category day, the only thing that you can burn on a category 1, anybody want to take a stab based on fuel?
Grass.
Grass, exactly. Your fields like we're standing in, you could burn this on a category 1 day. And why is that?
That much fuel.
Exactly. That fuel is going to burn quick, and it's going to burn up and out and be gone, right? So this is one of the easiest kind of burns you guys will be able to do. The smoke's not going to be thick. It's just going to burn real quick, real hot, and be gone. So that's why you can burn that on a category 1. Anything with any depth to it, whenever you start getting into litter or bigger fuels, that's at least a category 2 or higher. And I'll be honest, most burn plans that I write, I just at least go with a category 3. Because if you're burning on a 2, unless it's something very specific, kind of in the middle of nowhere, you could run into problems because the smoke still isn't going to get up before it hits that ceiling and starts just kind of dispersing around. So again, just to throw the numbers out at you, a 2 is 17 to 34,000. 3 is 34 to 51. A 4 is 51 to 68. And a 5 is 69 or higher.
1,000 feet?
1,000 feet. So that's why I'm saying whenever you're like driving down the interstate and you look over there and there's this column going straight up into the air,
And
way up there, that's the kind of categories we're talking about. But that's what we want. Exactly. We want to get above that. Well, that's fine. It disperses before it gets to them. We're good, you know. But we're trying to get it up there so that it disperses and gets away so it doesn't settle back in on downtown Charleston, you know, something like that. It's not cool whenever you start getting phone calls. So what we're trying to do is what we just talked about with the ventilation rate, right? We basically talked about fuel size and tonnage, right? Because that's the measurement that we're going to use for that. We're looking at tonnage of fuel that's going to burn and be consumed by the fire, which creates the smoke, compared to the ventilation rate. So that's how you get what you can burn on what days. So bigger picture is whenever you call in a burn, like if we were going to burn this field right here, we would call into dispatch and they put together a quadrant of everybody who's creating smoke that day and going to burn. And if those numbers exceed what that quadrant can take for that day, based on the ventilation rate, you can't burn.
Everybody or just
the last person to call in. Once it hits that max, they start cutting it off and saying you can no longer burn. So that's another reason why it's important to call early. But again, you'll get that on the professional side. But more importantly, you don't want to overload that quadrant with smoke, because even at the higher ventilation rates, all that smoke's going to collect and it's got to come down somewhere. It either dissipates or it comes down. It comes down as a fog or it comes down as, oh my God, we can't see anything. So again, that's what we're talking about. So bigger picture, looking at kind of what you guys are looking for. Full disclosure for what your group project is going to be. We got 3 different areas set around, and we're going to go visit all 3 of them. But we're going to look at the fuel loading and try to determine how many tons per acre we have. And simple math is you take that tonnage per acre, multiply by the acres, and you got your number that you need for your ventilation rate. And that you give all that to the dispatch whenever you call in, and they say you can burn or you can't. So again, if you're burning 1,000 acres and you have fuel loading of 12 to 15 an acre, you can hit those numbers pretty quick. So again, depending on what you're doing and where you're at, that'll be kind of a encasing for how you can build your burn plan, and also whether or not you're gonna be able to burn it all. So we talked about grasses, looking at fuels, and again, you guys will have the fueling definitions in your what?
PowerPoint.
No, not PowerPoint. What am I talking about? No. Smoke management guidelines.
But yeah, that.
And all of it's in there. It's not a PowerPoint. No. Well, I don't know. How did you put it in there?
No, it's a PDF.
Okay, it's a PDF, but anyway, whatever. But it's in the smoke management guidelines. It's a full tool. It's got all the things you need in there to put it together. That's why it's important for you guys to go and take a look at it, right? I'm just trying to help you guys get a good grade. Come on now. So whenever we start looking down at the categories and kind of what can be burned, that is kind of self-explanatory, because again, the higher loading, more smoke it's going to create, the higher it's got to go. So typical total fuel loadings, this is on page 10 out of 20, right? This is what we're going to be building, and because you guys can't see it, we'll just kind of go over it real quick. But there are different sections, and they give a roundabout description and then the number associated to how many tons per acre you're kind of looking at. So whenever you're dealing with grasses, that's going to be lower. You kind of got grass, brush. It has a little description in here which you guys can read. Wiregrass usually associated with longleaf, pine, scrub oak, overstory. Some forested areas that are fairly open. We might see this one, I don't know. We'll have to see. And then it gives you a range, right? We're looking at low, medium, high. So again, it's not a mathematical equation that you're going out there and measuring, but it's visually putting your eyes on it to see kind of how it measures up. So low, medium, high is kind of what we're looking at. Good example, the grass behind me. What would y'all think?
Low.
Low. The grass behind y'all, what would you think?
Medium.
Medium to possibly high, So again, it's not rocket science. It's just taking the time to put the pieces together. So then if we look out here, underneath the pine trees, right? That's no longer grass. Now we're burning timber, because anywhere trees are, especially mature trees, what's going to be down there along with the grass? Exactly. Pine straw, which is a little bit thicker. Then you also have limbs. All trees naturally drop limbs, even if you don't have the dead ones that are falling and having logs, which is even more smoke. So again, all those are broken down to kind of look at the loading amounts. So how do you want to do this on getting them to look at the loadings? Because that's the main thing they need to see to write the plan. So also in the thing they have the maps, right?
Yes.
Y'all have the stand maps, and this correlates to y'all's group numbers and everything like that, right? So for ease of this, since you don't have your own map, behind you is stand 2. Over here, stand 1, and stand 3 is going to be down this other road down here at the end.
They all should have a copy of at least that map in their packets.
Okay, perfect. You guys do have it. Well, we're even better. So we don't have to focus on that. Even better. So we got stands 1, 2, and 3, which are going to correlate to the groups. While we look at the overstory, and as you can see, I don't have to tell you what the overstory is because y'all can see that, right? But as part of your plan, if you look at your actual burn plan, you look at acres and tonnage, right? Tonnage per acre. We've already talked about that. Wind direction. And for this and this block up here, I want you to list out all the wind directions that you could potentially burn on this first block. Does that make sense? Because you have two different blocks down here for smoke sensitive areas and things. So wind direction, list every wind that you could burn on. And then wind speed. For wind speed, whenever you're looking at prescribed burning, you take a couple things into consideration. You look at the fuel that's going to be burning, of course. You want to look at your overstory, because even though these are mature-ish, you know, and these are kind of intermediate trees in here, but stand on the backside, completely mature longleaf. You can still kill mature longleaf with fire. I know that they're more accustomed to it than most trees we have, but you can kill them if you are burning them too hot or if you're burning them too slow. So you have to find that good balance where you have, basically you want the fire to brush past the trees rather than really getting intense heat around the boles and the stems of these trees. So real quick, whenever we're looking at prescribed burning, what are we doing? Big picture, what we're doing. We're reducing the fuel as well as the competition around the overstory which we want to protect, right? Things happen. As you can see, all these trees out here have little scorch marks because fortunately they have burned like last year. They burned. So as you can see, it comes back pretty nicely, right? Got a lot of that understory coming up, a lot of wiregrass, things like that. So again, looking behind you, we're going to look at loading over here. And I can't tell you what I think on this side. You have to look at the description once you get back to your
PDF.
Or the PDF of smoke management guidelines. But yes, getting closer. There you go. So once we get back to that, you guys will be able to remember back and, like she said, take pictures because you'll be able to view it and say, I rank that as low, medium, high within that category, right? So real quick, we'll, in the sake of time, stand two behind you. If you look, there is a dot there that you can see in that kind of northeast corner of that stand. That is an equipment shed. And with that equipment shed, they do have flammable things in sheds, things like that, but they burn around it, right? So again, be thinking about what you need to do to be able to burn around that area. You might want to go and take pictures. I don't know, that'll be up to you guys. Same thing over here in stand 1. This house is in stand 1. So whenever we start talking about smoke sensitive areas, it's all relative, right? Most things. So this house, they live on the property, they help manage the property. Do you think this is a smoke sensitive area, this house? Smoke sensitive, no. We do need to prepare around it and make sure fire doesn't get to it, right? It's a protected area, but smoke sensitive, they're fine with the smoke because they know what they signed up for. But if we were burning, if envision we were burning this block and this is a different landowner, they'd probably be very sensitive to the smoke, right? It would be a smoke sensitive area at that point. So again, whenever we get over to the other side, we'll look at that. Smoke sensitive areas that we talk about too, we want to make look at roadways. This roadway, not so much, right? Because it's 10 miles an hour coming into the park itself. You can kind of get away with smoking into it a little bit. What about the paved road out here where you got curvy people running 55?
They're going faster than that.
They are, you're right. Supposed to be going 55, right? What about Highway 17?
That's a good one.
Exactly.
4 miles out?
Two?
It's two along the road, but see, you brought up another good point. Depending on which way the smoke's going is going to depend on how far away it is.
Sure.
You know, if you have a southwest wind, which I have a map that's zoomed out for smoke sensitive areas.
That one is in your D2L.
Okay. So if we look right here, here's where we are with the stands, right? This is Hampton Plantation. So looking at that, you got pretty good distance before you hit Highway 17, right? Well, if you have a low category day and you're burning something thick, it can get there quicker than you think. So again, that's what I wanted to go to with this next table in your burn plan. Over here, sensitive areas, right? This is where we're going to list out what the smoke sensitive area is for each one of those wind directions. And if it is a no burn, still put in there that it's a house 500 feet away. So whenever we're talking about smoke sensitive area, you can't burn the track if in that wind direction, if there's a smoke sensitive area, what you're deeming as a smoke sensitive area within 1,000 feet. That's a no-fly zone. That's because it is close enough that even with that ground and 20-foot winds that you could smoke them in and cause problems for yourself. So what's the number we're looking for with smoke sensitive areas?
He just told you.
1,000 feet. If it's under 1,000 feet, what do? Don't burn on that wind, right? Pretty cut and dry. So that's the main cutoff that we're looking at. If it's within that 1,000 feet, we don't burn. So that's the main thing for this block. And your relative humidity, whenever we start talking about burning, that's very similar to the wind direction or the wind speed. You base it off of the overstory, the understory, and kind of the atmosphere. So generally in this area, you don't want to burn much below your 20 to 25% humidity, and I'd even bump that up to 30 in a lot of cases, because depending on the soil, anybody ever heard of peat? Like peat soil? You know, roots, ground system, all that living stuff underneath the soil. If you get much below that 20%, you run the risk of it actually burning underneath your fire breaks. And that peat can start burning farther down than you want to. All you want to do is knock off the top layer. So again, I was talking about mature longleafs. A lot of times, depending on the amount of duff, those feeder roots will come in and start growing in that duff layer. I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys, but still, stick with me. I am getting there. So if you burn on a low humidity day, a lot of times if you have high duff with a lot of mature longleaf and you know that you have those feeder roots and those little ticklers coming off the roots where they're actually sucking up all those nutrients, if you burn on a lower humidity day where it actually burns down, you'll kill that tree just by burning all of those roots off, because now they're burned and they don't soak up any nutrients anymore and starves the tree. So what you want to do in that case is wait until you've actually had a decent rain to bring that fuel moisture back up a little bit, and then burn a couple days after that rain. So again, there's always windows. And again, that's not for this, that's just for knowledge of, moving forward in your professional careers. Because again, you can kill some very lovely stands just by doing burn if you don't pay attention to that humidity. So whenever we're talking about relative humidity, just for, purposes of general, you want anywhere from 20, and then if you get over about 50, good luck getting it to burn. So you have that window. So your relative humidity is a lot of times in plans, it's not a number. Because remember, like we were talking down there, if you ride it too tight, you'll never hit that. So you want a window. You don't want it too wet because you want the fire to carry. You don't want it too dry because you don't want it to burn stuff below what you're trying to burn, right? You just want it to burn that top layer off. That kind of making sense for writing the plan? Y'all sticking with me? Okay. And then temperature. It goes back to the same thing about the size of your trees and the amount of vegetation and fuel that's actually going to be burning during the prescribed burn. So if you get your smaller trees, they can't handle the same heat that the larger trees can. You'll actually boil the sap on the inside of the tree. So we want to keep that temperature usually less than 80. Depending on tree size, if you get in some of these other areas, they're all pretty open right around here, but I'll show you an area over here in this corner. It's not on the stand. Well, actually, I'll show it to you right now. so that as we drive by, you guys can kind of look at the difference between not only burned and unburned, because this stand has been burned and that little corner has not. But if you look down here at stand 2, this little stand that is not part of the state park, it's private land, that has not been burned in years. I'd say decades, because it's been 10 years since I was working this area with the Forest Commission burning this property. So it's been a long time. It's very thickened. And you can see even the overstory, even though they're mature and old trees, are not very big. So if you burn on a day that's hotter, you'll actually wind up killing all those trees as well. So depending on the size of the trees, you kind of want to build that window. And the main thing you're looking for temperature is, again, too hot. So what I always do is I'll just say less than 85, depending on it, less than 80. Or if it's smaller, you want to bump it down to like 70, 75. Because again, if you say, oh, don't burn it less than 50, then again, you got a real short window in the year, especially in South Carolina, whenever you can burn that. You know, because today, even though in the shade it don't feel like it, it's over 50 degrees. And just this past weekend, it was 17. So again, good luck. You know, you want to build those windows where it's feasible, but then also safe. And then category days. I'm not trying to give this one to you, but does anybody remember what I said about category days? What I kind of number I throw out there that I don't really burn on? 3 and up. And that just builds a lot of parameter for me to be able to say that's safer. You know, I'm not going to come out here, especially whenever you have, even if we're burning on a true south wind and you have this road that's running parallel, you don't want to burn on a lower category day than you need to, because every vehicle that drives by on that road, any residual smoke is just going to suck back to that road and it's going to pull it right off, create an eddy effect. You guys will learn about that if you go further into fire. I'm not trying to bog you down again, but you get these little wind gaps everywhere that creates an open area next to a stand. You're going to get some of that draw, because again, that wind's going to start pushing from it. Kind of makes sense-ish? Okay. We'll walk over to stand 1 real quick, show you a few things, come back and look at stand 2, then we'll drive around to stand 3. Looking behind you, right, whenever we were in that stand 2, looking at it from the road, it looks very similar to stand 1, right? But whenever you get in here to stand 1 and look down, what are you seeing? Right? So what will that do to your fuel loading? Increase it, right? So again, looking from the road, it might look like it's nothing but a grass field underneath some pine trees, but whenever you walk out in there and start actually seeing, you might see some things that might create a little more smoke, right? Okay. So the other part of this burn plan on the back page is the special notes or whatever it's called. Know what it's called? Yeah, special notes. So these are things like I was talking about in stand 2. I told y'all about that building that's over there with the flammable material about it. This house is in this one, kind of thing. You know, things to watch out for. And then whenever you look at the stand, what you're trying to build into the plan is things that could cause a little bit of, you know, for lack of better terms, is the pucker factor, right? And if you guys go into fire, you'll learn that pucker factor, because whenever it starts burning there, you're like, ooh, is it gonna do like it's supposed to, you know? And I wanted to bring you to this spot because whenever we're talking with the property manager, if you look over here at these trees, right, all these trees are pretty much very similar in size, right? And you look across and most of the fuel loading is similar, right? So you would think the stand would burn about the same. But if you look over here about, what's that, 10 chains and start looking up, what are you seeing?
Dead trees.
Dead trees. That's a hot spot that happens in this stand. Why do you think that is?
Dead stuff burns faster, hotter.
Well, they were alive. The fire killed those trees. Why do you think the fire burned hotter there? What was I talking about, the road?
That curve.
If you look right here, there's a curve. And if you line up with that hot spot, you can look straight down the middle of the road. And things like that, what it causes is it's a basic tunnel for the wind to get to. And it'll be, and during the fire, I'm sure, over here, if the wind was blowing 5 miles an hour, it's probably 15 right there in that one spot. Just because of that eddy effect I was talking about and that channel where the wind gets down to ground level and just rips through.
Is there any restrictions on the power lines or anything?
Something to think about, you know. You can burn around power lines, but you probably don't want to burn the power pole, right? So, you know, during a prescribed burn, it's a little less hairy, but I have seen in wildfire situations where fires come out of the tops of trees, which is not what we want on a prescribed burn. Right? We just want the low flames. We don't want treetops burning. But if there are power lines, I have seen, you know, the fire actually touch the power lines and they'll start sparking and arcing out and everything. So kind of a watch out situation on that. So, and while we're here and close enough, if you look across the road, again, this is not in one of the stands, but you can just see the difference in fuel loading. You know, if we are looking at our, what again on the PDF?
Smoke guidelines. Smoke guidelines.
Exactly. By the end of the day, you're gonna nail it, I know it. Always gotta be one to pick on, you know. But if you look at the definition of the different types of loadings that we're talking about, just general, I won't read all the descriptions, but we got pine litter, then we got hardwood litter, we got pine hardwood litter, wiregrass, grass brush, palmetto gallberry, which is awful, marsh grass, we got bays, slash in place, and we got piled debris, right? So you can visually see there is a loading difference between what's going to burn if we burn this block over here and what's over there, right? It doesn't take a genius to figure out that that's going to create way more smoke and burn hotter than this over here, right? Everybody clear on that? Okay. All right, we'll walk over into the edge of 2 real quick. Snapshot of stand 2, right? Now again, looking from the road, stand 1 and stand 2 might seem similar. How y'all feel looking down?
Better.
A lot better.
Didn't burn a lot.
Yeah, they were both burned last year.
This one don't have many dead trees in the bottom of it.
Right. You know, you don't have that channel coming down, not the hot spots. In this area with a straight road, it's really a good burning area. So, don't see any from here. Does anybody know what a tree with a big wide white band around it means? Oh yeah, there is one back there. So, I'll point that out to you. Not dropping any hints or anything, but
The season to burn that, right?
no season.
That's
But-
apple burn though.
Is there like a certain distance here you have to clean around them? Or like recommended?
I wouldn't say a measured distance, but what makes the red cockaded woodpecker trees vulnerable?
The sap.
Exactly. And whenever I burned this place, it was for Valerie, who used to work for state parks, and she loved woodpecker trees. So again, I have seen fire run all the way up woodpecker trees all the way to the top with nothing else around it, because that sap comes down to the bottom and the flames can touch it. So again, something to think about. Looking at the size of the trees over here, pretty open, right? But then, not compared to this side, stand 1, would y'all say y'all have pretty much consistent trees or a little bit more variable?
More consistent.
Okay.
Cost of the wind travels faster.
Right. Do y'all feel pretty good about 2? Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll drive out and we'll just drive slow down by it so you can look at 2 some more. On that corner, be sure to like look as we come by, and you can see the difference between burned versus unburned areas. You see that fuel loading? Very similar to across the road, except that corner is even worse. And whenever we make the right, we'll be able to go up by it, and you'll be able to see the other side as well, and you can see a clear delineation of what's been burned and what hadn't. Okay, whenever we were driving, did y'all pay attention to that corner? Like I said, you know, that hadn't been burned in a long time, and look at the health factor of those trees. Correct. Whenever I was burning, like I said, I started with the Forest Commission in 07, and I was a project forester for Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester. So Hampton itself didn't have a burn program for several years. They actually got with us, we started burning a little bit. It was a lot hairier then. Now, after several years of burning, a lot of it's opened up and it looks more like that park landscape, right? Most of it looks beautiful. But again, at that same time, those trees in that corner were pretty much the exact same size, density, you know. So again, just from a forest health standpoint, you can see what burning versus non-burning does. It's a good showcase, right? So the other thing, while we're here for stand 2, that you have to think about is you have to look at the stand in its entirety of what you're going to burn whenever you're talking about smoke sensitive areas, right? So for smoke sensitive, one side of your burn may be more than 1,000 feet away, but if you're burning all the way to the other line, you have to go off of that closest line to whatever smoke sensitive there is, because that's where that smoke's going to come from, right? So if you have a box, like if this sheet is the box that you're going to burn, right? And from this area, from this side over here, it may be 3,000 feet to a smoke sensitive area, but from this side it may not be, right? So everything you're going to burn is going to be that closest point, even if it's the tip of like an arrow, because again, not all stands are square. I'm sure y'all figured out by now. Most of them aren't. Most of them look like a finger. But whatever closest point that is, that's what you mark as your smoke sensitive distance, right? Because again, with the plan, what are we doing? We're creating that buffer to cover our butt in case anything goes wrong, right? We want to err on the side of caution, and that's just making it even farther and less likely that any smoke's going to settle on anybody that's going to come and complain for it on you. Because I promise you, if you burn more than 2 or 3 times anywhere in your life, you'll get a complaint on you somehow. So you have to be able to revert back to what you did to cover your butt and to plan and to make that fit within your parameters so you're burning safe as possible. So here we're kind of getting into the edge of stand 3, right? Yep. Technically, this road right here to the left, as you can imagine, a little road, that's kind of the point where it comes across right here on the map, delineate the edge of stand 3. I went all the way down earlier. There is a turnaround spot, but not for 12 vehicles. So we're just gonna look at this corner and you guys can look at whatever you think you need to write your plan. But we'll walk into the stand a little bit and get a feel for what it is in here. I have no idea. I would say Hampton Plantation 3, whatever that is. Probably some sort of research plot. I mean, they even set it up for us. I didn't even know. You know? So, you guys can kind of glance around, and how do you feel about this stand difference between the other 2 we saw? There is a little bit of slope. You got to watch out for that. Why? and hotter, right? And that's because that fuel, as that fire is laying down, is closer to the flames. So it just sits there and rapidly goes faster, right? So again, you can get hot spots anywhere there's any kind of, slope. I'm from Horry County, so, other than the ditch bank, you don't really have much slope. But it does happen. And what about the overstory?
It's a bunch of mature dead trees.
Just in that one spot. That's probably an old beetle spot or something. But, what does that bring with it? Hot spot. Exactly, because you got all this down timber, right? Now the other side may or may not look like this too. But so far as the vegetation and the understory, this is a good snapshot of what you're looking at, right? Whenever we're talking about fuel loading. And whenever we're talking about fuel loading, I do want to say that because you made a good point. You can snapshot off of this corner and say, well, there's some down stuff. So we're going to mark it as slash. But the bigger picture, what we're looking at for loading, whenever you're talking about a stand loading, is you do want to look over the whole thing. So if you have one corner that has slash, all of it's not necessary to slash, right? Because that's just that one area. So where might that be mentioned on your burn plan? About the slash pile. And that special notes, that comment section, right? See, I need y'all to be getting it right by the end of the day, firing them off. But again, that's something you might look at versus, grading the whole thing as a higher loading. Because again, you're still trying to burn it correctly where it's going to be safe, but then you also want to be able to burn it too. If you mark it all as slash, it's going to bump your loading up and you may or may not be able to burn it. So, and the overstory overall, don't look at this standpoint, but how y'all feel about the actual trees, the size?
Good mature trees.
The spacing, and you got the understory.
There's more trees than just pine in this.
There he is, a little bit of mix in some places. So what kind of things would that bring? Leaves, which litter, difference in fuel. Do you think hardwood leaves, at least here, burn hotter, cooler than pine straw?
Probably cooler.
Exactly, because they're larger particles, right? So again, most of what goes in your plans are things that make you say, like I was talking about that pucker factor, right? You're like, we want to stick away from that, or we want to maybe use a backing fire through areas that might burn hotter versus running a full head fire or flank fire, But then, like I was talking about, if you have some mature trees that you just want to brush the fire by, rather than it sitting around each base of that tree and burning farther down, you may want to do a flanking or even a head fire because the fire just brushes across and knocks back the understory, which is what you're after, right? So you need to look at the full picture and really describe which is the reason in your burn plan of that purpose. So whenever we talk about purpose, we don't say, it's not like writing a book, but as a, timber management style and what you're trying to do based on the practice, you want to list out your goals of that prescribed burn. You want to say, I'm burning this area to do A, B, C, whatever that is. If it's to, you're burning somewhere that you want to completely smoke all of it and turn it into a food plot, put that in there because you can do that with fire. If you want to just knock the top off and release the pine trees, you can do that. If you're burning 1-year-old longleaf saplings because you're trying to get them out of the grass stage, it goes right here. Because again, all those warrant different types of fire, different methods, different days. One other thing that you can do with some of these mature stands is a summer burn, which is a pucker factor in itself. But whenever you start burning after the April time frame, you start getting in some of those 80, 85, maybe even 90 temperature days. You have to really look at your overstory stand and look at what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to accomplish hardwood control, there's no better way to burn than a summer burn. which is basically a late spring, early summer. Because once it gets 100 degrees, you don't burn. I mean, you'll kill everything. But if you can get that window where you can get in there and do a slow, cool backing fire with a little bit of flanking around a lot of hardwoods, you'll really do damage on the sweet gums and saplings, things like that you're trying to get rid of. And there's virtually no other way to get rid of a sweet gum stand than that. So again, everything has its place. Any questions other than specifics? Because I can't tell you specifics, but I can get general.
So the purpose of the unit is that up to our interpretation, like how we want to.
Yeah. For the burn plan, you guys are writing this burn plan. So you come up with the purpose. If I mean, probably for your teachers aspect, she wouldn't want you to say, "Oh, we're just going to burn it and do a soybean field." Probably wouldn't want to go that way, but I'll leave that up to her. So again, within the realms, the most common are, of course, wildlife management, timber management, or fuel reduction. A lot of those are the key things that throw out there that we